Welcome to our fifth session. We're about halfway through the class portion of the Academy. And today we're going to be talking about business planning. And let's see. To make sure I got my slides up. But first, just checking in with folks. How are people moving along? Has there been any hiccups along the way? I know, have the one-on-one sessions been going okay? Any progress to report? Michael says moving along nicely. That's fine, using the chat too. Okay, so today we are going to use a breakout session and we'll see who all is here for it. So I might jump in and out of the different rooms depending on who all is going to be present. But the main focus for today is going to be on business planning. And let me just get my slide together and make sure I'm not going to get, there we go. And of course, my computer is jamming. So. Okay. I think people should be able to see my screen now, and I'm just going to close some windows here. So business planning is something that the way I like to think about it is it's how you tell your story, and you know, it's explaining the model, the strategy, the concept out to the community as a whole. And this is going to include marketing to some extent, but also just thinking about is telling your story. And anytime you're telling a story, right, you want to think about your audience. So who is your audience? And you might have different versions of your business plan depending on who your audience is. So a key part, right, are potential members. This would be the current workers in the business who are looking at coming in to be member owners of the cooperative. Also consumers, if you're doing a solidarity model where you're going to be reaching out to consumer members to come in, they're going to want to know why this is something they should be doing. You know, what's not just what's in it for them materially, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but also what's so interesting about this model and this business for them to join it and to be part of it, to not just invest any money, but also invest their time. So likewise, investors, if you are doing some sort of investor model, I don't think anyone really is, you know, their focus is probably going to be more on about return on that investment and the overall viability of the business. And then following up a little bit with last week in shared capital, for them, you know, they look at what's often called the 4 C's of credit. So they want to be able to understand the character, the people in the organization, you know, who's managing things, what the governance looks like. Is the capacity there to repay the loan basically and to be viable as a business? Also, what the capital plans are for the organization, and then the overall. Oops, sorry. Then the overall conditions of the marketplace, and also in general the state of the business as it is now. So depending on who your audience is, you're going to want to tailor a business plan towards that. And so as we get into writing a business plan, I like to start with a group of different canvases and think of it as this is how you can create a picture of your cooperative. And as they say, a picture is 1,000 words. So as one way of telling your story. And for some people, this might be all you need for an internal document. You may not need a full written out drafted business plan. You might just be able to use these canvases to really crystallize the membership's thought around what it is, especially if it's a small organization with only 4 or 5 workers. It might just going through this process might be all you need. But obviously, if you are going to be looking at outside lenders or members or investors, they're going to want something probably a little bit more structured. So again, thinking about this as we go through. So there are basically 3 canvases that I like to work with. One is the ownership canvas, one is the value proposition canvas, and then both of those tie into what's larger. One is called the business model canvas. And I don't know if they're maybe does anyone have experience with any of those or the business model canvas? It's kind of gained popularity in the last couple of years, but maybe just put in the chat if yes or no, just to get a sense. I see no. Okay. Okay, well, let's start. Oops, let's start with the value proposition canvas. So this this model is based on this idea that, and it comes a little bit out of relationship marketing, but that people aren't as interested in the specific product or service you're doing as in what those products and services do for them. And so the value proposition then really comes down to, as they use the language here, of what sort of pains, what needs are the customer, in this case, we can also think of internal customers solving or relieving, and then what sort of gains, what sort of value added, what sort of bonus is out there too that might surprise and encourage and excite people. And so one of the ways of using this canvas is really looking at what it is that, what are the pains and gains that you perceive within the customer group, and then the pains and what would be those relievers and creators and gain creators, and then connecting the products and services you offer to those specific concepts of the jobs, the customer jobs. And when we talk about, customer jobs, this is one thing I don't necessarily like about this is the language, but there are really 3 ways of conceptualizing the job. One is through functionality, so really sort of material. I need a certain amount of seats in a car because I have X number of kids that I'll be transporting, or I need particular type of turntable for the work that I'm doing, that sort of thing. Very functional. It's those folks are generally speaking going to also be people who are very knowledgeable about the product, and so they might be a little bit more transactional based. So their pains are going to be much more about pricing, and same with their gains, but also thinking in that. And I should say that every customer, depending on what is happening, can hold different functional, and then also there's social jobs and then emotional jobs. And so the social is more about how they want to present themselves in the community, and how they see themselves. And so that might lead to a lot of different other sets of pains and gains. And so whether it's about brand is important, or status is important, or maybe even just wanting to project that they're in a very healthy environment, or whatever, it's thinking about that and sort of the social status of what the person is looking for. And then the third aspect are the emotional jobs. And so I'm looking, I'll be putting a document in the files for you to kind of read through and get more into it. But and that might be, part of it is what they're what's going to make them really enjoy the product, or what's going to bring them enjoyment, what's going to bring them pleasure, what's going to ease any sort of displeasure they might have. So, thinking like, and sometimes these can overlap. So for instance, having a convertible might have both a status function, but it might also have sort of an emotion function of, being able to have the top down on a sunny day and just really being able to feel sort of free in that sense. And so this is where we get into sort of the pains and gains. And so um, gains are basically a positive outcome in the state of being, both in functional, emotional, and social. And pains reflect the negative outcomes of not getting those needs met. And so um, this is where, when you go through this and start thinking about, what are the, why are customers coming to your store? And then where are their pains and gains? And then on the other side of it, of course, is working through and saying, what are we producing or providing service for, and how do they meet those gains? And so when I work through this, and um, I try to even, draw sort of a line from the product through either the gain or pain relievers, then to the pain or gains, and directly to the job. And this is a way of really seeing the direct connection between the customer and the product or service that you provide. And then ideally you would do one of these for each membership customer segment. And you can even, I would even include, your members, right? And sometimes if you have different classification of members, so for instance, if you're in a multi-stakeholder co-op, you might even have three ways of looking at it. You might have, a customer segment, you might have a customer member segment, and then you might have the worker member segment. And so, for workers, what are the job is literally the job, right? It's the employment. And so what pains are they relieving? What gains are they getting? And again, not just in the sense of purely functional, right? Of having a job, of getting a paycheck, but also, agency and work. One of the longitudinal studies that have been done in the US shows that most workers in the United States value having a say in how they do their work. In fact, they value it higher than getting paid. And so, that is definitely a gain that adds where, the paycheck might relieve that pain. So thinking of it that way. Any quick questions? Or I'm kind of all alone today running the system. So any questions or thoughts, do just come up, mute and jump in. Okay, well, quiet crowd, and let's move on. So this is one canvas. I think this is kind of a core part of it. And then the next canvas, this is one that was created by a group called Start.coop, which is an incubator for cooperative startups, and something that they've put out there to be used. And this is really specifically looking at the ownership model for the co-op. And so again, this kind of takes you through the questions here. Some of this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but that's okay, because I think sometimes looking at the same thing from different points of view or perspectives can really help you flesh it out more. And this idea is about building an overall business strategy, and not just a strategy, but one that is really understood and bought into by the members of the co-op. And so this is what gives the co-op a strength and a difference, and really an advantage, is that it's people are really all rowing in the same direction here. So starts with the stakeholders, identifying them if you have multi-stakeholders, but also recognizing that co-ops are not just isolated towards member benefit. They also have a commitment to community, to being good neighbors, but also the community of people that are connected to the owners, right? Whether that's family, whether that's the environment even. And so really getting a sense of who these people and things are in your community, and how do you interact with them. Then what are the different benefits that our member owners get? And again, for worker co-ops, this is going to be, tangible like work benefits, but it's also going to be intangible benefits too, like having a voice in the floor, or how you make decisions, or how they're involved. Also, what are the expectations of your members? I know some of you have been thinking about what the membership should be, and that's going to be part of this, but it's also, are people going to be expected to if you're a small group, that means there's an expectation of taking on ownership roles that might be done outside of normal work time, right? So I know sometimes that can be really palatable for people, who aren't as engaged in the co-op model, and that they suddenly become owners, and they're like, what do you mean I have to spend 2 hours in a meeting after working all day? That's not what I signed up for. So this is about getting through those expectations, trying to make sure everyone's on board and agrees to that. The governance rights, again, this is going to help flesh out some of your bylaws. Who makes what decisions, right? One of the exercises that I like to do is to actually draw out a sheet of paper and write, membership, board, management, and then start going through about different decisions that each group makes. And this is a great spot to kind of put that in there. What does the membership vote on the budget? That used to be a really big thing in consumer co-ops, not so much anymore. Sometimes you might have certain capital acquisitions have to require membership votes. Otherwise, generally speaking, the board makes a lot of decisions, and then management also has their own decisions to make. How much can management spend without having to talk to the board? Getting loans usually requires a board approval at some point. Also, how often are the membership meetings going to happen? Usually there's one a year. I think that's mandated by law, but it's very often co-ops might have more often meetings, depending on how engaged the membership is in doing the management. Same with the board. Boards usually meet once a month, but it's not uncommon for them to meet twice a month if there's a lot going on. But they can also meet quarterly, or even or less if it's if the business allows for that. And then what happens at each meeting? The financial rights, this again might have to do with the membership fee, but it's also really getting into that distribution of profit shares. What happens if there's a dissolution of the co-op? What are the basic expectations? Should you have commitments to unallocated equity? So a lot of co-ops do that, where they were actually set aside. When we were talking about equity a few weeks ago, right? There's a certain spot where the board can actually set aside a percentage of any surplus as unallocated, and this becomes sort of a rainy day fund. But some co-ops don't do that. Some co-ops distribute the entire amount back to the members as a pass-through, and they might even do it quarterly or even monthly if their cash flow is able to do it. So again, some of the ways to work through this. This is also going to really affect your bylaws. And then I think you'll see probably how some of this will tie into the business plan is then looking at the bottom lines here of investment and guidance. So how much capital are you going to need to succeed over the 6 to 12 months after conversion? And how much of that is going to be coming from members and other sources. Some of that you'll be able to get by working through the spreadsheet that we put out last week. Some of it is just definitely going to have to also be what your comfort level is. And then finally, who are advisors and which stakeholder groups do you represent? So it's not uncommon. We mentioned Blue Scorcher, where they actually have seats on their board for different stakeholders in the community, within their vendor groups, and even within consumer groups. And so if you're going to have that, you don't necessarily have to have a board of directors seat for that. You can have sort of an advisory board as well. But again, working through this canvas is going to allow you to really, I think, dive into some of these meaty issues. And then as you're writing your bylaws, really help also create sort of a nice picture of what your ownership model for all looks like. Let's check any chats. Okay, so I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm just going to keep going. And then this brings us to the last canvas, the one that is, oops, there we go. And so this looks a little different than what most business model canvases look like. And that's because added to this is the center role. So normally you would just have value proposition there, but this model that was created, I'm not really sure by who, but it's one I like using, really talks about cooperatives within the sense of what's the worker value proposition. So breaking that value proposition down into these three categories of the value from the consumer perspective, that's the business value proposition, the overall community value proposition. What are you doing for your community? And, creating decent jobs is definitely part of that. Also being maybe a good environmental steward. So when we go back to the value canvas, you might want to do one just for community value. And then the worker value, what do members get out of it? And of course, if you're multi-stakeholder or solidarity co-op, you might want to also break the community value down as also including your consumer members for this thing. And then this really allows you to help populate what's going to become the business plan. So what are your customer segments? Is there a value proposition? There should be a value proposition connection for each customer segment. What are the different customer relationships within the organization? I don't have all my questions up for this, but the different ways you're going to reach your customers. So the left-hand side tends to be about outward focused modeling here. So that's going to include part of your marketing strategy of social media, advertising, word of mouth. What are the primary channels for maintaining those customer relationships and help you deliver that value proposition? And then what are the capacities and resources within that your organization has? Do you have enough staff to sort of have a marketing department, or how easy is it for you if you were to grow your customer base by 10% next year? What would that mean for your capacities and resources to meet that demand without sacrificing quality for it? On the left-hand side, we have more of an internal focus. What are the core activities of the co-op? And then, of course, how does that tie into the value propositions and back to your customer segments? I forgot to change this, but I don't really like the term human capital at all. And I think that's really not right. But it's, what are your skill sets, I guess, is thinking about it within, and this kind of ties into capacities and resources, but what does your workforce, what do the management, we'll talk about management and governance, I guess, but where are the strengths and how you're organized for allowing the workers to engage those key activities. And again, going back to the ownership canvas, who are core partners, and this might be vendors, key vendors. It might also be professional advisors, and of course even us, Northwest Co-op Development Center, people that you can rely on or do rely on. If you have a major vendor that controls a fair percentage of your business, I would kind of tuck them into this partner, because at a certain point they're more than just a vendor. And we'll talk about the power of vendors in a little bit as we get into this, but listing out who the different partners within the group are. This might also include working with federations. So the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops is a valuable partner for any worker co-op in our community. They provide material benefits, and they also provide peer support through co-ops. And then finally, management and governance, and really hitting those high points of the ownership canvas, but also, what does your management going to look like? And then thinking of that as you build this in, is how do the management and governance partners and the workforce all tie into making those key activities, and and building that value proposition across the way. And then at the bottom is your financial basis. So what are the revenue streams? And then what are your cost structures? And are the revenue streams, how are they related to that? Are they going to be enough to meet that cost structure so that you can overall meet your mission and the value proposition? So that's a lot. Those are the canvases. Is it fairly clear? The documents that are in the shared folder will have more pointed questions for the business model canvas, and also for, I think there'll be a reading for the value canvas as well. Are there any thoughts or reflections at this point? Okay, well, okay, so I was thinking I would like to take about 30 minutes and do an exercise. And what I would suggest is break into the groups, which will open in a second, into the group for your business, and kind of go through this a value proposition. You don't have to complete it. I don't, it may take you longer than 30 minutes, but I'll go through at least either one customer group or one member segment, or maybe a community segment, and think about what the different pains and gains are. And then maybe, depending how far you get, where does the current business relieve those pains or create gains for them? And then we'll return in 30 minutes and talk a little bit more about the business planning, but also reflect back on how that exercise worked. And so let me so I'm gonna open the rooms now, and then I'll be jumping in and out of the rooms, but I'll go to the ones with the fewest people first. And then if you don't have a co-op, feel free to jump into any of the rooms that you want and just help out. We'll learn.
John, I'm an orphan again. Oh no, I think you have me in with Tori and
Yeah, if you want to jump in with Trillium, or otherwise.
Yes, that'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Possibly pulling us into a different meeting.
Hello?
Lars.
If you're there, you're muted. No, we're not muted.
Hello?
Hello.
You
Hi. Hi there. This is Laura, Blue Heron Bakery.
Hi, Laura.
Oh, hi.
This is Ethan and Sam and Gemma at Sound Audio Repair.
Hi there. Ethan, Jim, and who else?
I'm
Oh,
Ethan.
hi.
Hi. This is Sam. This is
Hi,
Jim.
Sam. Hi there. Hi.
Hey.
Let's see if I can get my video work.
Just left. The breakout room.
Look at ourselves. Stop the video.
Well, let's abandon the breakout room again. Try to talk to John this time. Last week in the meeting. Breakout room right there.
We left our breakout room. There's nobody here in the, or are we in the breakout room?
I don't know if this is us. Put that arrow right there. Yeah.
Not joined. John's in Blue Herons right now. Trillium's got a big thing going.
Well, they got a bunch of people from their business. Okay, let's just try to message John. Can't change that.
Can you direct message people?
That's what I'm trying to figure out how to do. Yeah, how did we get out of the breakout room before?
We're not in it right now.
Yeah, we are.
No,
no,
we're not.
we're-
It says not joined.
Where are we?
We are just in the main room with no one else.
Oh, okay. Oh, hey, yes, I am. But muted. You're muted, Diane. Hey,
Hey, I was trying to get back into the main room to ask John a question.
Yeah, so were we.
yeah, Fred's not here, so we're not really sure what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, we wanted to share screen, but we can't because nobody has that authority. And I don't know where John's at.
He's in the Blue Heron room. If you
In the
click,
Blue Heron room.
if you click the breakout room button, then you can join whatever breakout room you want. We might go in there
Okay,
to ask.
I'm gonna go in there.
Okay.
All right.
I'll be right back. I can
Bye.
do that. Bye.
John, you're muted.
All right, thank you. So just some quick reflections of how it went. Did people find it useful? I think, normally if, doing this one-on-one, it's great to have sort of a big white sheet of paper and just draw the images of the different circles out and just start using Post-it notes to put up your ideas. So doing it sort of, in this format is a little bit more cumbersome, but do people feel good about exploring the different pains and gains of customer groups? Did we focus on one customer group? I think for us, Blue Heron, they were able to identify the different segments pretty well and some of the companies. But what are thoughts from folks? Do you feel comfortable giving it a go this
I
week?
think for me, it just shows us how much more work we need to be doing, and it's a fast moving train, so it's trying to figure out how to do it all at once, right? It's exciting. That part's exciting. Yeah. So I guess the next part is I'm really looking forward to we're about 24 workers, bringing all the herons in, having just a little initial, this is what we're doing. Even before we have like a way for them to talk to customers. It's just there's a momentum that's building. And this meeting helped with that too, just building the momentum.
Great, thanks. Anyone from Sound Audio or Trillium?
So I'll chime in for Trillium. We focused really on the business model canvas because I'm selfish and that's what I wanted to do. But you know, I think for us it's a good activity because you know we've been running as a company for over 9 years now. So there's a lot of those questions that are easy to answer, and then there's some areas that it's really easy for us to start to unpack where are our opportunities for growth as we move forward, and then what are the things that are a bit more challenging to answer as we shift into a different kind of a business model. So it's our takeaway from this is we're going to set aside some time to continue to workshop this internally before we meet again, because it's good conversations and it's exactly the right conversations that we need to have as we make this transition.
Okay. Folks at Sound Audio, any?
Sorry, we were talking amongst ourselves. What did we asking for reflections on the thing?
Yeah, just your reflection on it. Do you find it useful? Does it help give some deeper perspectives? Or
Yeah, I think it kind of like, at least for me, like gives perspective that like I have a lot more to be thinking about like the granularity of like all of our like services and like what all of that is means for customers and just how to value all that. So.
Okay, well, good. So yeah, definitely something to keep working on. Like I said, this is something where if you can, put out a big sheet of paper and actually just draw the images up and use Post-it notes to get ideas up there and then fine tune them, and to really where you end up having a nice value proposition statement that really sort of encompasses what you're trying to do, but also have that background of the really specific sort of pains and gains along and understanding that emotional and social end of it as well. So all right, I'm gonna get back to our slideshow here, and yeah, so those three canvases, the owner canvas, value proposition canvas, and business model canvas. Some people say you can just take the business model canvas and that can be it, a one-page simple document that you can show people. And that's true. I think, if you do it really well and really make it pop, it can really be good. But sometimes, people are still going to want a more formal business plan. And so I want to kind of go through that, and you'll see, I think, how these different parts of the canvas connect into it, and then we'll move it from there. And I'm just gonna, let's see here real quick. I'm just going to, Fred, I'm going to make you a co-host if you want to just help with any issues and stuff. I'm drafting you. Okay, so let's see. Let's get back to this. Okay, so the business plan, going through the different components and tools that you can use. Some of this we'll revisit again later in the session, but first, and this is really just, I'm sorry, I put up a really bad picture here and it's in Spanish, but I know what it all is. So the 5 forces
It'll
model,
make us grow a little bit.
yes, the 5 forces model is developed by Michael Porter in the 90s, and it really is about looking at how your organization exists in the market. And what's nice about it is that this model really works whether you're a Fortune 100 company or whether you're a small local shop. So that center box there talks about competitive rivalry in your market. So when I was at Union Cab, we had 2 other cab companies in town. I'm going to use Union Cab as a model for this because this is where I learned for 5 forces model and how I started using it. And it really shows how it can be just a simple model for a local business. It's really designed a lot for startups, but it can also be used and should be used, I think, for any business as an ongoing sort of structure. So as you're making this sort of leap into cooperative business, it's a great time to look at this. So the center box and competitive rivalry, and so that's where you really break down who are your direct and maybe secondary competitors in your market. So at Union Cab, we had 2 other cab companies, but only one of those also used a meter. The other one used a zone and shared ride system. So they were competitors, but we had some differences in that. And then, what share of the market do they have? How competitive is your market? For us, when we started doing the 5 forces model, roughly it was almost even between the cab companies. One was a little bit higher than the other, one was a little bit lower. We were kind of in the middle, but basically, we were getting like 30% of the market. And, so it was really tight. It was a really heavy competitive model. The box on top, in green, that is talk about what are the essential threshold for entering the market. So different markets have different thresholds, and this is something to figure out and learn. So in the cab company in Madison, you had to be able to provide citywide service, which is 55 square miles, I think it was, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that meant that to be licensed as a cab company, you had to really have at least 10 working cabs and probably 15 drivers to really get started, that you weren't otherwise going to really be able to meet the regulatory environment. So home care co-ops, right, in Washington, they have to get licensed, they have to have insurance. So before they can even get their license, they have to show they have proof of insurance. The caregivers have to be licensed and by the state, so they have their own regulatory barrier to get into work. Other companies, not so much. A bookstore, you just need your city operating licenses, and you can pretty much open up shop. So it really varies for each business what you need to get in. So in the food industry, I imagine there's a fair amount of food safety regulation, things like that. So thinking, what are the different barriers for someone new coming into your market? And think about this as potential rivals, right? What's the likelihood that a new cab company is going to be able, for instance, in our case, to pop up? We had three cab companies for almost 25 years. Nobody else entered the market because it was just, the barrier was a little too high. On the left in the sort of light blue is about, or actually I'll go to the bottom. The bottom is about the power of the bargaining power of your clients. So part of this has to do with, what are different, are there barriers for your clients leaving you for another customer? How easy is for them to jump to to one of your competitors, for instance? So, the cab world is pretty easy, that people could simply just call another company. They didn't necessarily, they weren't really locked into us, although we did have some accounts where it was a little bit more difficult for them to do that, but still they could simply have 3 accounts with 3 companies. And so there's a fair amount of jumping around among the customers. There's loyalty that plays into this, but loyalty only takes you so far. It's more thinking about whether the barriers is, if they're hard contracts that you have with customers where they are obligated to do a certain amount of business with you, or it might be where you're the only one providing a certain product in the community. So, it used to be that food co-ops kind of had were locked in on organics. Nobody else had organic food. So the power of the customer in that case was kind of limited. They couldn't really go to Trader Joe's or, or somewhere else to get organics. But then Whole Foods came in and kind of eased that relationship and made that rivalry a little bit harder. So thinking about the different aspects of clients, and also sometimes clients might end up going into competition with you. So this is always something to think about as you get bigger. So for Union Cab, like one of our big clients was a car dealership, right? And they were really a big part of it. So they didn't go into business with us, but they also were big enough that they provided enough trips every day that we kind of had to really give them preferential treatment, right? They got discounts that other people didn't get. We made sure they were happy because it was really important that the 100 or 50 rides a day that they provided, which was about 7% of our overall revenue, that we kept them in place. So their power in the relationship between us and the Union Cab and the dealership was really on the dealership side, because they could just really leave if they wanted to. Likewise, in the red box, it's a similar thing. Is like I got my stuff around here, but is about the power of vendors, right? So your vendors also might have different power relationships with you. So I think in the breakout group we were talking about UNFI. It used to be UNFI was a smaller, leaner organization. And so maybe they were much more dependent upon relationships with small food providers, but now they're much larger. And so the power differential between those individual providers and UNFI has switched. And maybe the stores need UNFI more than the other way around. For us, right, one of our big issues was liability insurance and gasoline for Union Cab. So the people we were getting those services from, we definitely had relationships with them, and it's like who had the power. So for many decades, there was only one insurance provider for taxi cabs in Wisconsin, and they pretty much had a monopoly and were able to dictate terms to us. When that market opened up, we were able to start negotiating and do better. For gasoline, Union Cab was fortunate enough to have its own 10,000-gallon tank. So we were able to work with a cooperative, actually, Cenex Co-op, and be able to actually get lock-in prices, because we were buying 30,000 gallons of gas a month. So our relationship, and it was a co-op, so it was a good relationship, but it allowed us the ability to have some control over pricing in that regard. On the other side, your vendors can also go into business against you. So the fourth cab company to start up in Madison was actually the largest tow truck company. They already had 24-hour service, and they already had a 24-hour dispatch center, and they understood driving in Madison. And so I guess basically they decided to expand out, and they decided to start running their own cab company. And so one of our vendors basically became our competitor. And part of that was probably some of what they learned by watching us and learning about us from drivers as they were towing in cabs over the years. And so it's just one of those things of also thinking about the potential power of vendors is also that they might come into competition with you. And so what are the dynamics there within your marketplace of how these relationships work? And then finally, this is one that I find the most interesting, is called the threat of substitution. And so substitution is where we just talked about pains and gains. It's where somebody is able to satisfy those pains or get those gains from something else, right? So the reasons that they're coming to you can be met elsewhere. So the big learning moment for me at Union Cab was when I realized it was during the 2008 recession. Hotels were dying for customers, and West Side Hotel was offering a Radisson, so a relatively upscale hotel, was offering a walk-in deal of $25 a night. And I realized that somebody could basically go out to the West Side for an evening, to a steakhouse, have a nice dinner, see a show, and get the hotel room instead of taking a cab both ways. And they would have actually paid at least for the price of a meal in the difference what they would save. Then I found out that there were actually people in the outskirts of Madison that routinely would plan on going out to see a show or a concert in Madison. And rather than take a $40 cab ride each way, they would simply just get a hotel room for $60. And then they had their car in the morning and they didn't have to worry about drinking and driving. So hotels, even though they were one of the areas that provided rides for us, were also competing with us for nighttime traffic. And so thinking about what is a substitute for your business. And so, you know, in Detroit, leading up to the recession, you know, dollar menus became a substitute for grocery stores. That it just became cheaper for people to get their, you know, calorie needs met through a dollar menu than they could afford shopping at grocery stores. And I think I remember even reading somewhere that during the 2008 collapse, there were actually people were going in to try to help people learn to set up gardens and things like that in Detroit, but they found that a lot of people they were working with didn't necessarily, you know, have cooking skills because there weren't any grocery stores inside the city limits of Detroit. That there were convenience stores, they were small little, you know, places like that and dollar menus. And so, you know, thinking about how substitution in your marketplace can really affect, again, this competitive rivalry can really be eye-opening for you, because also it can give you the option to see what are you acting as a substitute for on somebody else's business as well. So that's the 5 forces model. And again, really great to do this as an exercise where you can sort of put this up on the wall and start really thinking through the different questions and that. And this also can really help with the marketing part of your business plan.
John,
Yes.
as you're telling you're telling the stories about what happened with competitors with the taxi co-op with the 5 forces model. There's something that I thought about is, oh my gosh, we're getting so overwhelmed with all these things we're trying to put into place. And what's going to happen is, I don't know, a year from now, we're going to be stuck in a new thing. There'll be a new competitor that will come in, or a new way will happen. A vendor will become a competitor. These things happen, is what you were explaining. It seems to me that we should be talking about, and maybe there is a plan and I just missed that, revisiting as we become cooperatives, these group of people, we need to come back together again. I mean, maybe it's in a year, maybe it's in 6 months, maybe it's in 2 years. Oh, hey, now we're stuck in this. What do we do, John? This thing's happening. And then you can remember when I told you about the 5 forces model and my story. So I'm wondering if with this thing you're doing with the Olympia Academy, if you've looked at doing something to a check-in process, a revisiting process, where are you now, kind of, yeah. You know what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. Well, we haven't, but I do know that we are trying to start a regional network called Co-Sound of the area cooperatives. And that might actually be a really great role for Co-Sound to be playing, is to, you know, continually checking in with member co-ops to, and you know, and I think doing this 5 forces model every couple of years is probably worth it. Just, you know, getting that sense of thinking about the future, and also, you know, again, creating that sort of unique experience for your co-op, so that you do reduce the power of vendors and customers, but also, you know, keep the threat of substitution and to a minimum, but also, you know, really raise the bar for threat of entry, right? And that's kind of the way I see of using this. But yeah, definitely, we should definitely check
And you
it.
mentioned us having a regional organization of co-ops, something
Yeah.
coming up with that.
Fred might be able to talk more about that if he wants to real quick. But I don't know.
Yeah. So Co-Sound is the South Sounds regional network of cooperatives. There's also one for up north that's located in Bellingham, but I think they do the whole north kind of Skagit area. And then one on the peninsula and a one in the east side, and then also now a nascent one in the Rogue River Valley, I think. But the organization is fairly new. We've just incorporated. and we are about to start doing membership drive this spring. There is going to be a convening this summer where we're inviting members of all the different regional networks to get together in June. And if you're interested, I can make sure we get the invitation for that to go out to everybody in the academy. And definitely our next meeting will be the first meeting we have since we've formally incorporated. And we're going to talk about how do we sort of want to introduce ourselves and start holding our first sort of membership drive events. And definitely everyone in the academy will be getting information about that and asked to join probably in the next month or so.
I love hearing about that. Want to hear more. Thank you, Fred.
Great. So I'm gonna jump into the other model. This is the other one that's this is sometimes it's referred to as the STEP or pest analysis. I use Pestle. So this is another way of really examining your co-op and where it sits in its environment. And so Pestle is an acronym, and it stands for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. So what I like to do is, depending on how many people you have on your committee or buyout committee, is assigning one of these or two to each person and letting each person sort of become an expert on how this works. So at Union Cab, for our social part at Union Cab, we would do an internal what's called a social audit, where we would look at how well we're engaged with our mission and really internally focused, but it can also have some external issues too. What are the technological changes happening in your industry, and how is that going to affect the way you engage your industry? Likewise, with environmental issues and economic issues, political, legal can overlap each other a little bit, but definitely thinking about what are particular changes happening at the state and local level regarding regulation, but also the overall climate in which you operate. So again, what we did at UniCam when we used this is everybody, so we had binders and we just would become experts on this and then teach everyone else, and that would help us all sort of have a really good analysis of the organization. And then this kind of then ties into the business plan as well, as you talk about the general overview and the economic landscape of the organization, and key things that you might want to keep an eye on. So in the cab world, technology, of course, we saw online ordering coming in years before Uber, and we actually had online ordering years before Uber, but we didn't have the apps, and so that was where we just never were able to catch up. And but these are the way things, by looking ahead, you can get ahead of some of these curves and then be ready to make it part of your business plan, to be forward thinking, but also really a learning organization, which I think is one of the cores of being a co-op, is that the idea is educating members and keeping that information flowing, and so that people understand why the co-op's making the decisions it's making, and not getting caught up in second guessing and that sort of thing. So I was going to do this, but I don't think we're going to have time today. But I was thinking, and maybe this is something that in the groups you can do, or just while you're thinking about it, is taking one of these and just working through and saying, is there a threat of substitution? What would be a substitute for what you're doing now? What are the relative power relationships for vendors and creators? And maybe if we have time at the end, we can do this or determine. Likewise, thinking about what the different pest analyses are. So I didn't, I think since we only have a half hour left, I want to just kind of go through with the presentation, and maybe we can wrap up. We can go back and finish out the day with one of these discussions. But are there any questions about either of those models? Or? Okay. So this brings us to kind of the basic outline, at least the way I do business plans is, the executive summary is usually right there after the title page or after the contents. And the executive summary is a real quick bullet point of the key points of what's coming out. That means, the overall vision of the success of the project, and who's, basically taking kind of key points from each of this. The company overview is definitely wanting to really focus in on your vision and mission, maybe the history, especially since your conversions, you want to talk about, where the business started and why it converted, and or why it's converting and going forward. This is where some of the pestle analysis can also really come in to talk about the overall environment that the co-op exists. Break down your management, maybe also decision-making. How is management working in the organization? If there's a general manager, or if there are other management positions, you might want to list them out and even identify the current incumbent and talk about their knowledge in the industry and their overall, maybe their engagement with co-ops. I know, sometimes definitely for co-op friendly lenders, they want to see that the people who are going to be making the managerial decisions have experience in the field, but also have understanding of what it means to manage in a co-op. So that's kind of the company overview part. For ownership and governance, the ownership canvas really plays a part, maybe a little bit of the canvas, and where you really explain what your co-op model is, who the members are, the board of directors, identify them along with along with their relative experience to both the business and co-ops, and maybe if there are other partners that you're working with, like Northwest Co-op Development Center, or maybe there's other key advisors that you're engaged with. That also helps build that capacity and value for the 4 C's of credit, right? It helps people understand that, one, the company overview helps them understand that you're really solid about understanding the business. This part really helps that you have the capacity. Market analysis really lets them know that you've thought out and figured out the market that the business exists in. And this is where the 5 forces can be really valuable. You might also run into what are called the 4 Ps. We'll talk more about that next week as we talk about marketing, but also really creating a sense of, what is your pricing strategy? Why does your co-op really speak to the place that it's in? And again, who are the people involved? Then this all leads down to that value, using the value canvas again, and really laying out the business strategy, connecting the values and operations, talking about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how it's going to meet the market place. And people are going to want your services, want your goods, and why the co-op model is going to help create that value for them. And then finally, financial analysis. And that's really building out a cost projection, which the spreadsheet we put out last week can help with. 3 years is really nice. I think it gives people a good way of looking at it. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You're not trying to predict the future to a nth degree. You're just trying to say, we've looked at the numbers based on our overall knowledge of the business. And here's where we believe realistically the numbers are going to be going. You generally want to perhaps overemphasize expenses and underestimate revenues, but you want to show that this is going to be a going concern. It's going to have a healthy cash flow, and that there's going to be a realistic model going forward for the business to be viable. And that brings us just to, so maybe we will have time to do that exercise. We can go back to it. But so next week we're going to talk about marketing. So that's a key part of the business plan, but you also want to have your own marketing plan. So we're going to put it in the context of being a cooperative. We use the term marketing our co-op advantage. So part of the co-op difference is it's membership based and it's commitment to values and principles, and then how that plays out and how you talk about the cooperative. That's week 6. Week 7, we are going to talk about accountability, and I know this came up, and some people are asking me about talking about how what happens if people don't live up to their obligations in a worker co-op? What do you do? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about accountability models, evaluations, discipline, managing complaints. That'll also be part of marketing, and just generally that. Week 8, we're going to have a community panel come in. We have folks from the community here in Olympia who elsewhere in the Sound region who have gone through the conversion process already. They've agreed to come and join and talk a little bit about their co-op, their conversion process, things they learned, things maybe they would like to, if they were to do it over again, they would do differently, and be able to answer any of your questions. So it would be a great opportunity to ask people about how discipline works, and really hear it from folks that are doing it right now and have just gone through the conversion process. And that leads us into week 9, where we are going to kind of continue that internal focus. We're going to talk about hiring and anti-discrimination and anti-harassment. We also have a special guest speaker coming in who will talk very specifically about diversity, equity, and I forgot the I, inclusion, using a focus of hiring people who are returning to out of from prison, and the value of that. Week 10, we don't have any class, and week 11, we don't have any class, but it'll give time for everyone to really work on these materials. And then we'll come back in week 12 to do an overall review and strategic planning. We'll review most of what, review what we've been talking about the last 11 weeks, and really have everyone work out a plan for how to get from week 12 to conversion. So that is our plan for the next 5 weeks, or 6 or 7 weeks, I guess. So the chat is okay. So are there any questions or reflections at this point on the business plan, the pesto analysis, 5 forces, anything else? And I know we had some people drop off, but does anyone want to stay and maybe work on that exercise? Otherwise, we can certainly call it early today. I know there's a lot of information to drop on folks, and people are also kind of busy with some things, but we can take a vote. Who would like to stay and work on the pestle exercise?
I've got to go. Some of these things that we're going to be working on and started, you initiated a terrific thing about we are now putting together it's sort of like the job description review stuff for some immediate issues. It's exciting. It's like some of this stuff, it's like, oh, hey, well, we could just, go ahead and do this review of this this position, but we can't show any favoritism. So we've got to make sure, or lack of favoritism, that we are reviewing everybody in all fairness, because, we want to be fair. So, yeah, so there's some stuff coming up that, like you've come by and met in our little storage room office, and that has gotten the ball rolling. Now we have got a few workers that are also saying, well, when do I get to do this? When can I, watch the videos? When am I going to hear more? So you're doing a good thing. We're getting the momentum going.
Well, good. Right. Well, then let's, I saw Sound Audio, they needed to jump. So let's, so let's keep working on the groups. We'll come back next week to talk about marketing. The video from last week is up. Sam will get this one in the folder as soon as possible. I'll also put some of the readings around the value canvas and business model canvas in there as well. People want to start diving into it. Keep working on the bylaws and the financial modeling, and we'll come back next week to talk about marketing, which is one of my favorite topics. So, all right, thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, I'm just wondering, Diane, if you maybe have some time, not right now, but sometime in the next couple of days. I'm digging my way through the bylaws and I could use another pair of eyes. If not you, maybe John, either one of you.
Sure, but I'm not sure, maybe Diane may have stepped out. Bylaws for,
Yes, so I'm working with a small forest therapy guide group.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
I didn't do this, but they did, and I don't blame them for doing it. They took what they got from the national organization and they just kind of did this dump into a document called bylaws. And I didn't like it. Like, I didn't like it a lot. And so what I said to them was, look, I'm going to clean this up because it doesn't have good categories. It's just everything in the kitchen sink. I think there's some stuff in there that they thought they needed, but I have some concerns about having a set of bylaws that is so big and so all encompassing and so global that as a document